Hello and welcome everybody. Do you want to know if a servant is good enough to spend your hard-earned quartz on? Great! Let me give you the information necessary for it. Welcome to the Gacha Guide, everyone. Today's topic servant is the Thunderous Emperor Ivan the Terrible. We will be covering all the points that you see on screen right now. If you don't have time to read them, feel free to pause. Let's jump right into his stats right away. So, Ivan the Terrible is a 5-star AoE Rider class servant, meaning he is strong against casters and weak against assassins. He has 11,619 attack at level 90, making him the highest AoE attacking rider in the game on his introduction. His HP at level 90 is 13,284, which is one of the highest rider HP totals in the game. His raw stats are quite high, very powerful. His hidden stats reveal that he has a 0.62% MP gain on his attacks, with cards to make use of it as 4-hit quick cards, 3-hit arts cards, 2-hit buster cards, 4-hit extra attack, and 5-hit noble phantasm. This is somewhat average hit count. The arts card having 3 hits is nice. The quick card's a little above average, but he only has one of those, so he doesn't get a lot of use out of it. But what he does get a lot of use out of is his star weight at 200. 200 is one amongst the highest in the game. It's like top 20 in the game. Easy. So it is incredibly easy to get stars onto this guy. Now, moving to his star creation rate, 8.9% is probably a little below average. It's not particularly high. Luckily, this isn't going to matter all that much. He only makes use of one quick card, and he does have a passive to help out with this just a little bit, along with a skill to help out with this just a bit. Now, moving on to his deck in Noble Phantasm. He is a servant with what I would like to call the standard deck: 1 quick, 2 arts, and 2 buster cards. Very simple. His Noble Phantasm, Zveri Krishnikod, the beast that accompanied me on my journeys, is an AoE Buster Noble Phantasm, 5 hits. It deals damage to all enemies, reduces their Buster resistance for 3 turns by 20%, and before dealing damage, increases his NP damage, which is based on the overcharge, between 30 and a whopping 70% if you can somehow get to that 500% overcharge. Really tough to get there, though. Now, this will eventually, he will get an interlude, which will increase the power of his Noble Phantasm, because at its base, it's decent, but a little bit weak. When it gets improved, it will deal 100% more damage and reduce Buster resistance by an extra 10% for a 30% total for 3 turns. That is very nice. Next up, his passives. He has only 2 passives: Magic Resistance D+, and Riding EX. Magic Resistance increases his debuff resist by 13%, and Riding EX increases his quick card effectiveness by 12%, making his 1 quick card make just a few more stars, do a little bit more damage. To be honest, these passives kind of suck. Debuff resistance is whatever. 9 times out of 10, you don't really care about it that much because it's so low. And he only has 1 quick card, so Riding EX is 1 out of 6 cards total. That's pretty weak. Not great. On to his skills. First off, Contradictory Mentality. This increases his MP gain between 30 and 50% based on level for 3 turns, and it will remove all debuffs on him. This is honestly a relatively weak skill. It's a slightly better form of Gilgamesh's second skill, Golden Rule, because it has the debuff removal on top of the NP gain. But in a world where lots of servants have a 50% straight up NP charge, and this is not a arts-based servant that is trying to loop or anything like that, this ability is kind of weak. I'm not a fan of it in general. The debuff removal is nice, though. Moving on to his second skill, Innocent Monster Divergent. He will gain critical stars every turn between 5 and 10 stars per turn, and increase his Buster card effectiveness between 20 and 40% for 3 turns for both abilities. This is a very good skill. First off, the Buster Up alone is 40% for 3 turns. Most Buster Ups you see getting to the 40 to 50% last 1 turn for their single buff. So this is already fantastic just with that. And the ability to just gain some extra stars with this guy's massive star weight means that you can almost guarantee they're going in his direction to make sure that he is outputting that damage. So the stars are a nice little boon onto an already good Buster buff. And finally, his third skill, Emergency Powers, gives him invincibility for 1 turn, decreases the attack of all enemies between 10 and 20% based on level, and finally removes all buffs from all enemies. This is quite a fantastic skill for one of the more dangerous fights. Removing stuff like high critical up, critical damage up, or defensive buffs in order to bypass that and deal damage are all really, really, really desirable traits, which Ivan does to not only one enemy, but the entire enemy team. This allows him to trample over even the toughest enemy compositions. And of course, reducing their attack is a nice little bonus. So, what materials do we need to level up these skills? Well, I got bad news, guys. Costs are overall pretty high on Ivan. We have 15 horseshoes in total per skill, a 44 bone cost per skill, 59 poisonous needles per skill, and 24 of this new material known as Eternal Frost, which is just added in Lost Belt 1. Luckily, it's only 24 per skill, not over here like Anastasia demanding 1,000 of them. So a total of 72 of a new material. But altogether, that makes for 45 horseshoes, 132 bones, and 177 poisonous needles on top of an entirely new material. That's really high on the cost chart in general. So, how does Ivan stack up against other servants? Are these high costs worth it? Well, as an AoE-oriented rider, his main competition come from Iskander and Francis Drake. Ivan, between these three, has the highest damage output, but due to Drake's amazing 50% self-charge and dealing fairly high damage herself, she edges him out just through ease of use in order to be able to farm things. Ivan does a little better on more challenging fights, but Drake does better in your average everyday, we're gonna go farm some stuff. And for clearing out things in a faster manner because of it. Now, very soon, there will be new competition, and I mean very soon. I believe it's the next event right after Lost Belt 1. And that is, the next new event, I should say, and that is Achilles will be released. And if you plan on getting Scotty and making use of Scotty strats for quick cards, Achilles is going to be the alpha rider when it comes to AoE. He's going to be #1. He will be edging out Drake because his damage, his looping potential, everything will be so incredibly high once Scotty comes out to buff him. So, and even without Scotty, actually, Achilles is still very strong. He's still at least on par with Iskander and Ivan, perhaps even going a little bit beyond them. So I wouldn't blame you if you want to wait for Achilles if you still need a strong 5-star AoE rider. In my personal opinion here, Ivan's really solid, but he's not terribly amazing. He doesn't particularly stand out. He's great for Buster teams due to lowering resistances and very good at clearing a hard wave, but he doesn't have any major specialty that sets him above and beyond. He's good, he's just not great. But if you like Ivan, if you happen to get him through a random roll maybe, if you get him, let's take a look at what skills to prioritize leveling. Now, you definitely want to prioritize Innocent Monster for your first skill to level up and your first skill to focus on. The Buster card effectiveness increase affects 3 out of his 6 cards, so half of his deck, including his Noble Phantasm there. Gives him extra star gain in order to allow him to get those fat crits off with his very high star weight, and is overall just exactly what you want to have Ivan doing. The next skill to work on would be Contradictory Mentality. I know I said it's kind of a bad skill, and I'm not a big fan of it, but it scales pretty decently, going from 30 to 50% on the NP gain, and you kind of need to do whatever you can to increase your ability to gain NP on servants. It's just how the game is played, basically. And the other reason is that Emergency Powers is really good at level 1, but doesn't scale terribly well. The only thing that scales is one out of 3 of the abilities it's providing, and that is the attack decrease on all enemies, and it only goes from 10 to 20%. And that is kind of good, but not particularly great. So you can leave Emergency Powers at level 1 and still get perfectly fine effectiveness out of it. Now, what craft essences work well on Ivan? Well, as always, fast NP craft essences like Kaleidoscope and Imaginary Element are always good no matter what servant you're working with, especially for AoE servants to make it easy to get their wave clear off. Now, if you're going for a more challenging fight, or you need an extra boon in damage, then of course, the best things to look for, as he is a Buster servant, is to prioritize Buster card effectiveness up, but he also very much likes to have starting charge up, attack up, crit up, as he is not only a strong nuker, but a good attacker. Starry Nights has literally everything you could possibly want. It has Buster Up, it has Starting Charge, it has Critical Power Up. All fantastic. Also, it has Tosaka. Who doesn't love Tosaka? Now, if you don't have that, good free alternatives from events are Golden Sumo Tournament and Aerial Drive. Golden Sumo Tournament being your generic attack up, along with a 50% starting charge, and Aerial Drive being a generic Buster Up, along with 50% starting charge. As for servants to group him with, well, first off, it's Waver. Hi, Waver. Let me poke your glasses. Poke, poke. Anyway, Waver is on the list. He will always be on the list. 50% charge that he can give to a single servant, along with attack up, defense up, crit up. Waver is fantastic. He is your universal servant or support. But for a little bit more specifications, we've got Merlin, your common Buster support. Kind of a no-brainer here. His third skill is especially good on Ivan, with its massive Buster and critical damage up. Since Ivan has star generation on his own and a very high star weight, you can almost guarantee to get big Buster crits off. Other very good servants to go with if you don't have one of these 2 5-stars for you, you can take Alexander, or wow, I keep saying Alexander Anderson. I'm sorry, Hans Christian Andersen. My brain is dumb. Hans Christian Andersen is a fantastic support, especially for Ivan, as he generates his own stars per turn along with Ivan, making an even larger little pile of stars for Ivan to suck up. And if you can get his NP off, that's an attack up, a defense up, he has a crit up on one of his skills, he has healing. Anderson's great for those more difficult, longer fights. Shakespeare has a 1-turn, very strong Buster up that you can use in order to charge Ivan for clearing out one of those harder waves. And finally, we have Florence Nightingale, who is actually surprisingly good with Ivan. The reason being that Nightingale has a very powerful 3-turn Buster up at 50% if it's rank 10 that she can target Ivan with to make him hit like a truck, and you can combine her Noble Phantasm with Ivan's attack down on his third skill to greatly reduce incoming damage from enemies, meaning that Nightingale herself can actually stay on the field even though she's a Berserker with a little more relative ease. So, a little mini tutorial for the servant. Generally, you're going to want to start with your first skill as soon as you see an arts card for Ivan, so you can get that bigger gain and work towards his MP. If your NP is ready, pop your second skill, pop the MP. Alternatively, if you can guarantee a Buster card crit, pop your second skill and get that extra damage up. Save your third skill to either dodge an MP or remove an annoying buff. 9 times out of 10, that little damage reduction is not going to make too much of a difference unless you're trying to pair him with Nightingale or an Asterios or some other weird composition where you're trying to reduce enemy incoming damage. So the best thing to do is to save it to generally remove an enemy's buff. That way you can bypass defenses or prevent them from hitting too hard so that your supports can stay alive, for example. Too long didn't watch? This is a good servant to roll for overall. He's pretty good. He has the highest raw card damage when it comes to AoE riders, especially. He combos well with other busters. He may not be super special, but he does get the job done well enough. He's about the strongest you can get when it comes to his damage outside of MPs. And of course, he combos well with other buster damage dealers. I already said that, but it bears repeating, because that's the kind of thing that gives him a slight niche that the other riders don't have. And finally, if you really need a good reason, he's voiced by the Dragon of Dojima! Hell yeah, Kiryu! So hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, let me know your opinions on Ivan. Follow me on Twitch, follow on YouTube, and thanks very much for watching. I'll see you guys next time.